Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am doing a sit down wrap up this month because I did zero vlogging of my thoughts on the books in September. So I'm just gonna go over them now like I used to do. We may go back to this type of wrap up. We may stick with the vlog type. I'm not really sure. I haven't decided yet. So the first book that I actually finished right at the beginning of the month, and that was the Unofficial Disneyland 1955 Companion by Jim Korkis. And this is a book that is just sort of looking at the year that Disneyland was founded, so 1955, and it is a book with just little stories and anecdotes. It also breaks it down by the different parks and what would have been, what rides and businesses and things would have been in the park that year, and just different stories about it. So the first half of this book, talking about kind of the people as well as the kind of process that Disney originally went through to get the money and the land and everything to build Disneyland, was super interesting. Then when we got kind of back into the information about the park, or the parks, and then like there's a whole section that's just different people and their stories, it was super repetitive. And also I just felt like it was repetitive, but it didn't give enough information. So there were certain things that it went over and over again, but it still didn't feel like they elaborated enough on those specific stories even to make me really feel like I understood what was happening or to get excited about it. So I would say that there are probably better books out there about Disneyland. Now, I feel like after reading this, I understand some of the things and it got me excited, which is the point of reading Disney books before I go to Disney, is to get excited about the parks and to look for little Easter eggs and things like that. And I do feel like this did that, but at the same time, I feel like maybe I should have picked up a different one. This wasn't necessarily the best. And while I really have enjoyed Jim Korkis's works in the past, I would say this is probably a pass for most people, just not his best. And then the next book I read, or rather listened to, was Roomies. This is a book, there's two authors, and I'm sorry I don't have the book in front of me so I don't remember their names, but it is a book written by, co-authored by two women, and it is the story of these two girls who are going off to college and they're going to be roommates, and it's about the process of them getting to know each other through emails and stories before they go to college, but it's also about each one of them individually and what they're going through. So their struggles with their family life, leaving behind people, getting to know new people. It was really interesting. I liked it a lot. It's probably, I think I gave it 4 stars, but it also made me think about my college roommate and our getting to know each other process. But it was more, while it was about that and about sharing yourself with a new person that you don't know and how you're gonna have to just sort of adapt, but it was also very much about each person's life, and I thought it had wonderful character development and things that each girl went through and how they sort of rationalized and worked through those things was really interesting. I would definitely recommend it. It was a fun listen. The audiobook was fantastic. The next book I listened to went in a completely different direction, and that was Hum If You Don't Know the Words by Bianca Moraes. I think, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I'm very sorry. I should have looked that up before the video. This was phenomenal. Probably one of my favorite books I've read / listened to this year. The audiobook of this was really fantastic. I loved that the woman who narrated it was actually South African. I worked with somebody who was from South Africa when I was right out of college, and this literally felt like her reading it to me. It was just, I think it added so much to the book because it is set in South Africa. So it is set in South Africa during apartheid, and it is about two different, so it's about a little girl who at the very beginning of the book, she goes through a really tragic situation. She loses her parents. That's not a spoiler. I want to say it says it in the book, in the blurb. And then it's about another woman, a black woman, who is searching for her daughter, and about their cultures and the way those cultures clash. It's about just the race relations during that time in South Africa, which is heartbreaking, and it just, so many things in this book just tore me apart. It just was very honest and real and raw. There is one part of this that has to do with the little girl and how she copes, that I didn't see coming, and I was like, thankfully I was like in a parking lot, so I wasn't like driving, but I remember that when it's revealed what's happening, I literally screamed, "What?" Because I just didn't see it coming at all. And I feel like even if I'd been reading it in the written word, I would not have seen that coming. It was so shocking, but it was so well done because I don't think you were supposed to see it coming. Now looking back, I could see how you would, but I just was absolutely floored, and it was just shocking. So much of this book was really shocking, but also the characters in this are some of my favorite characters. Beauty is just phenomenal. Her strength, her intelligence, just her kindness, everything about her is so wonderful. This is definitely one of those books that I would recommend to so many people. It's beautiful. So yes, this one, I feel like I'm good with the yellow spine books. This one and Your Heart is a Muscle the Size of Your Fist are two books that, in reading them, I thought that I would like the premise, that both of them floored me. Absolutely floored me. So yes, definitely recommend. Again, we're switching gears. The Cherry Harvester by Lucy Sana. I feel like this was like 4 different books. It was one of those books where when you, like, I started reading it and I was really enjoying it. And I will say that she sets a scene beautifully. I mean, you feel like you are on the farm. It is set during World War II in Wisconsin, maybe. It's somewhere in kind of rural Midwest. And they own a cherry farm. They live on a cherry farm. And because all the men and boys have been called away to war, there's nobody to work the farms, and this town is just suffering. And everyone's kind of starving, and businesses are failing. And so they bring in German prisoners of war and house them on their properties in like tent camps, and they work on the farms. So in this one, they're harvesting cherries. They're, you know, helping with the cherry trees and everything that goes along with the cherry farm. So that premise in itself is super fascinating. And I mean, there's a lot of real world historical information in here that was new to me, which kind of I'm a little ashamed that it's new to me, but that's, you know, the way America teaches history. We leave out the ugly parts. It could have been so good, and it wasn't. It really wasn't. So you have this storyline of how the daughter really wants to go to college, and how her father is this really smart man who gave up his career, or gave up college and being a scholar and everything he wanted to do to come back and work on this farm because his dad died. You have the mom who has always been from farm family, loves everything about farming. And then you have the prisoners of war, and of course it's a historical romance, so there's a romance portion. I expected it to go one way, it went like 10 miles in the other direction. So the actual romance I was not expecting. There are 2 romances. Well, there's actually really 4. But they're all sort of a mess, and I don't feel like you really get a whole story for any of them. There's also this weird, random kind of Gatsby-esque thing that happens in here, which was like, what? It felt like a little bit like it was trying to introduce magical realism, but it wasn't, because it was sort of unbelievable. It was a mess. So me trying to explain it and it sounds like a mess coming out of my mouth, that's because it was. So I will say she writes scenery pretty well, like beautifully. You feel like you're there. but the storylines, the plot, were an absolute freaking mess. And the way it all came together in the end was just comical and cartoonish and silly. And the last book that I finished was the book that we were reading as a group book for the read-along. I kind of feel like I did a terrible job with hosting this read-a-thon or read-along, mostly because September was a mess for me. It was just so busy. That was The Tale for the Time Being. And so I started out reading this book in physical copy. This copy it's from a used bookstore, which usually does not bother me. This one literally smells like the allergy vials that I get my allergy shots from. And it made my like sinuses swell up. So I don't really know what happened. That's irrelevant to the wrap up though. So what that really means is that I switched to the audiobook about, I want to say 40 pages in. I'm glad I did though, because there are all of these annotations in this book. So it's got these annotations, footnotes, I guess, throughout the book. So it's a story of two people. So Ruth, who is in kind of present day, who finds this lunchbox that washes up on the shore in, I guess they're in like northwest Washington. And it has a diary in it from a girl in Japan. One half of it is Ruth and her life and how this diary affects her and kind of where she is and that kind of thing. The other half is the actual diary. Well, the footnotes are Ruth annotating the diary. And I hated that part, like actually hated it. It's like those stupid blurb things in Fangirl. I hated that part of Fangirl, and I should have just skipped on because it kind of ruined the reading experience. The footnotes were ruining the reading experience for me on this. I get what she was trying to do, and at the end of the audiobook she says that she recommends both because when she writes, she reads it out loud. So the audiobook, and Ruth Ozeki reads the audiobook as well. So the audiobook is very much how she wrote it because she's reading it as she would be reading it while writing it. But also the footnotes add something. They did not add anything to me. They absolutely took away from the book. So I'm glad I went with the audiobook. My thoughts on this, I thought it was really wonderful. Again, with you start to see things that you weren't necessarily taught in history. It also addresses suicide in a very real way. So trigger warning absolutely for suicide on this. But I think that it does a very interesting job of analyzing how different cultures look at suicide, because it goes into kind of the history and the cultural views around suicide in Japan. So that I found really interesting. I thought that Nao's story and the story of Jiko, her great-grandmother, were really super interesting, and I absolutely loved those. Ruth was really interesting in kind of what she was going through and the atmosphere that was created around where she lived on this remote island, as well as in Nao's story, the atmosphere that was created when she was at the temple with Jiko. So I thought that it does a beautiful job with atmosphere, a beautiful job with characters. One thing, there's at one point in the book, they discuss 9/11, and there's Nao talking about it in her diary as it's happening, and there's Ruth talking about it as she's thinking back on it after reading what Nao has written. That part was a little hard to listen to and to wrap my head around, and just kind of how other people were viewing it at the time, especially in other cultures. So that was really hard. So I would say that if you have ties to that in a very real and solid way, that part is going to be really difficult to listen to or to read. So fair warning on that. Overall, I thought this was a really wonderfully written book. The ending sort of is ambiguous. I feel like it lost me a little bit, and I feel like I would if I went back and read it or listened to it again, that last part of it, I might get more out of it. But yeah, I didn't think the ending was nearly as strong as the rest of the book. It's really about just now and what she's going through and all the heartbreak and just real world things that this young girl is dealing with. So yes, so that is it. Those are the books that I read this month. Not a whole lot. I just, with everything being so busy, I had kind of a rough month, so it is what it is. I'm hoping October is going to be better. Probably won't, just because of all the travel and craziness going on, but we'll see. We'll keep hopeful. But if you've read any of these books, I would love to hear your thoughts. I know a lot of you read A Tale for the Time Being with me, so I'd love to hear your thoughts. I didn't get as much time to discuss in the Goodreads group as I would have liked to, but I'm going to try to go back and put in some thoughts so that we can actually have a discussion. But yes, I hope you guys are having a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye!